Mr. President, I'm here this afternoon to speak about the amendment to address sanctions on Russia, but I want to preface my remarks by saying, like all of us here in the Capitol today, that my thoughts are with Congressman Scalise, with the staff member, the 2 Capitol police officers, and others who were part of this terrible tragedy this morning. In particular, I want to salute the officers involved whose courage and professionalism undoubtedly saved many lives, and I join with the entire Senate family in hoping for a full recovery for everyone involved. Now, in a few minutes, we will vote on a bipartisan amendment to strengthen sanctions on Russia and to mandate rigorous congressional review of any effort to loosen the sanctions regime. I'm pleased to co-sponsor this amendment, which has real teeth, including provisions that I advocated for to prevent sanctioned individuals from using family members to circumvent sanctions. I'm also pleased that the amendment includes congressional review of any decision to restore Russia's access to non-embassy compounds that were seized at the end of last year in the United States. I think this is not the time to grant Russia such privileges, especially given that it would bolster their intelligence gathering capabilities. I'm pleased that this is a bipartisan amendment that, thanks to the leadership of Chair and Ranking Member of the Foreign Relations Committee, on which I serve, Chair Corker and Ranking Member Cardin, as well as the Chair and Ranking Member of the Banking Committee, Senator Crapo, who is here, and Ranking Member Brown. They worked really hard to come up with a bipartisan agreement. I also want to recognize Senators McCain and Graham, whose work on the underlying bill gave us a foundation to come up with this amendment. And again, on a personal level, I want to thank especially the Chair and Ranking Member of the Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Corker, had made a commitment to get this bill done after we got back from the break, and he has been good to his word, and we have a bipartisan agreement. Now, I think these measures are necessary because the United States has been attacked by a hostile foreign power. As a result, we have a responsibility to respond in a way that punishes the attacker and that strives to prevent a recurrence in the future. In January, the Director of National Intelligence released a declassified report on Russia's interference in our election. And I think it's important to reiterate what that report said, because it states, and I quote, "We assess Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered an influence campaign in 2016 aimed at the U.S. presidential election. Russia's goals were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process." Well, recently, we've learned more about the scope of that interference. A classified National Security Agency report prepared prior to the November election concluded that Russian military intelligence executed a cyber attack on at least one U.S. voting software supplier and sent spear phishing emails to more than 100 local election officials. Well, yesterday, Bloomberg reported that Russia's cyber attack on the U.S. electoral system included incursions into voter databases and software systems in as many as 39 states. So we're learning more and more about the extent to which Russia attacked our voting system and tried to undermine our elections. That's exactly why the Senate stands united behind this bipartisan amendment to stiffen sanctions. We must not allow this kind of interference in our elections become a normal process. And what we have heard from experts in the intelligence community, they have warned us that if Russia gets a pass on this, that it will interfere in future U.S. elections. We've seen it in Europe and other Western democracies. In testimony last month before the Judiciary Committee, the former Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper, said, and I quote, "I believe the Russians are now emboldened to continue such activities in the future, both here and around the world, and to do so even more intensely. And he goes on to say, I hope the American people recognize the severity of this threat and we collectively counter it before it further erodes the fabric of our democracy. Well, Russia's interference in our electoral process should outrage every patriotic American. We need a bolder, more aggressive strategy for deterring Russia. This bipartisan agreement to stiffen sanctions is a critical step forward. In concert with this legislation, we need to be focused on bolstering NATO and our European allies, and we need to demonstrate more vigorous support for Ukraine's efforts to strengthen its democracy and independence. We need to be more aggressive in countering the Russia propaganda and disinformation campaign, including the Russia Today empire. So, finally, I want to again applaud the leadership of all of our committees who were involved in coming up with this bipartisan agreement. Also, I want to applaud the bipartisan leadership of Majority Leader McConnell and Minority Leader Schumer, because without their negotiations, we would not be here today. I certainly urge all of my colleagues in both houses of Congress to promptly approve this legislation, and I hope the President will sign it. Thank you, Mr. President.